Welcome to Stitch with Me. Today we're going to be working on another of our Halloween projects. This one is called Web Wishes. It's a Web Wishes, this one's Web Wishes Happy Halloween. I will have a couple different options of things written into Halloween webs on the Haunted Hollow Stitchscape background. So I've worked on this one a little bit, but let's get started. Okay. I have stitched the most of the outside web on this one. I haven't stitched all the in between the lines, and in some places I came close but stopped maybe a stitch shy because I wasn't sure where that letter was going to end up. As I worked, I marked the entire thing to begin with, but as I worked, some of the letters wore off just a little bit, and so I've gone back and marked them again. Most of them I could see. I just went back and drew the lines again. And believe it or not, I also have stitched the L and the O and totally hated them. So I unpicked them and we'll start again. Let's start with that O to begin with. I'm still going to do the back stitch around the outside of it, but I'm going to try and stay inside rather than outside of the lines, because that was part of what I didn't like on the first time. Was I felt like it was just too fat. As I put it together. So we're just going to go inside. And again, this pretty much this entire project is back stitch, except a few stitches we'll fill in with in the end. But it's a lot of back stitches. I have used the Easy Marks Dark pencil to mark the lines here, both the first time and when I retraced some of them to clear them up. And I am stitching with a chenille needle with the Wonderful Glamour. It is the equivalent of about a size 12. And I like the silver. I think sometimes it's called Rain. It's the 7126 color that Wonderful has. That's the lightest silver. Silver and white. And I think it will work perfectly for this. So remember to stay inside the lines so that they're just a slight bit more narrow. And so the first time I did it, I filled in the L and the O with just rows of backstitch, and it did not look right. For starters, I think that I got enough rows in there that it kind of made it bulge out, and that so it just looked big and blocky and chunky and not like a web at all. So we're going to try something different this time. But I want to do the outside still in the same web look as the rest of the web. I had hoped that by stitching the outside webs that it wouldn't disturb the middle and that I would still be able to see the letters. And I could see them quite a bit. So tracing them, the W was the only one that was missing, and you can see with the little dots on the W that I went back and remarked it with my placement guide. Okay, it might end up having a little bit of a point right here because that's going to keep going on, but we're going to keep. I'm going to take a tiny stitch right here because a tiny stitch will help it have a more of a point to it. A softer point, but it'll still have a point to it. Let's keep it on the inside, on the line or to the inside of the line so that we get that smaller shape. And I think part of why I didn't like it was because it just didn't look like a web to me. The web a web is not completely filled in. It's a lot of lines back and forth. And so that's what we're going to do to fill it this time, is change it so that it looks more like lines back and forth. Not a grid, but something a little bit more assorted looking. I don't know what the right word is. All right, let's jump to the middle. Remember, we want to stay, now when I say inside of this one, I don't want to be inside this circle. I want to be closer to the O. So this one I will stay either on the line or just outside of that line, so it's to the center of the O. One of my projects for this afternoon is to dye a new fiber that I'm trying for the spider's body. I can twist it up, which all metallic threads want to do. So let's unwind that. I'm hoping to have a hairy little spider on there when we finish this guy up. Away we go. The next part where I fill it in is the part that scares me because I don't really have any plan in place. I just know that solid is bad, so I think we're just going to do some crisscrossed straight stitches, probably some fly stitches, because fly stitches automatically have that angled stitch connected here and there, because that's what a fly stitch is in it. So we'll probably do some fly stitches, but I don't want it to just look like fly stitches right down the center, so we'll have to get a little creative in how we do them. And we might switch and do feather stitches. Feather stitches also would work to fill it in. And I probably am going to do the L first, because I think the L will be the easiest, and if not, it'll be the easiest to unpick and drag in, right? So after we stitch this O, we'll go over and stitch the L, and then we'll start to work on filling it in. So I don't care if these letters don't turn out perfect, because when I sketched them, they were sketched to be web drawn. So they're connected to the web parts, and they have corners, and some parts are longer and some parts are shorter on purpose, because that's how they kind of get connected to the web. And then the last step of this one will be to add the beads. I want it to look like it's got dewdrops on it. So to do that, I have, wow, I gotta figure out where they are. I have some clear iridescent beads. So they'll just sparkle, really, like little tiny water dewdrops. I got the tiniest beads, which are the 15 knot Toho seed beads, and that is what I plan on using on these. All right, let's do an L because that sounds like fun, and then we can fill it up. And then what I'm going to do with those beads is put them in places where there are connection points for the letters, and then here and there or connection points in the web, and then not just everywhere on the web, but out on some of these longer ones, I might do additional dewdrops on those. Okay, we went across the top. When you're doing a stem stitch and you need to turn a corner, one thing that you can do is take it to the back and tie a knot, because then the knot won't come back up through, and then you can go right back out through the same hole. Oh, turn it the right way, and continue stitching. Well, that tie a knot method is one of my get square corner on stem stitches tricks. With this thread, I probably should have tied 2 little knots to keep it more square. Okay, keep it to the inside. We don't want too fat of an L here. So the drawing doesn't show, you can see on the drawing, they're narrow little letters, but when I trace them, it's less exact, and that's how I end up with a fat L. So if you're going, oh, they seem narrow. Yeah, they are narrow. It's that when I traced them here, I did not trace very well the right spot. So if I stay inside of my line, I think what I'll get is the L with the width. That's what I'm looking for. We are almost to the end of our thread, which means the thread has about had it. It's about ready to give out. We got some worn spots, but in a web, a worn spots is fine. If I was doing something elegant, I might be tempted to just switch, but I'm hoping that this will make it down to the bottom corner. There, we'll untwist it. Since it's so short, it has very little patience with our twists. Okay, I think I'll put 2 in that space because I do know that I want it to land right on that line. And again, any seam here that I don't like the looks of is going to get covered. Well, not any seam, but I can always cover that with a bead if I don't like how it ends up looking. And it's a web. It's not perfect. It's not penmanship. It's just a web. Okay, let's trim that and get a new thread. Don't forget to use the Hugo's amazing tape around your, any of your slick threads. Okay. I want to end at the top, so I'm going to head up do that the opposite direction. The reason I want to end at the top is I think I'm probably smarter drawing the making the spider web going from the top down. So okay, this one I should be able to go just barely on the inside of the line or on the line and maintain the same thickness that's on my draft here, or on my sketch or my vellum placement guide, just inside. Now when it comes to the web part, I've already determined, even though I haven't done it because I've done it in my head several times, that you get to decide how full you want the letters to be. You need them to be full enough that you can tell a difference between them and these lines, but these aren't very full, so I don't think it'll take a lot for it to look that much fuller, but I'm gonna just go over it a couple times and we'll see how it looks. Well, I may only need to go over it once if it gets full enough. Wow, these are big stitches. They're straight lines, but that's probably bigger the stitch than what I want. There we go, that's better. And all right, so the first one that I'm going to do, now that we are up here, it's just a stitch from one side to the other. And I'm going to keep it kind of close. So I'll come up here in the corner, and I'm going to come across to this other side. Okay, and then the next one that I'm going to do is to come back out kind of near there I would like it to overlap, so I'm coming out just above that spot. And then I'm going to go over to this side, but this time I'm going to do the fly stitch thing. So there are stitches that we could do, like a Portuguese knotted stem stitch would be one, or yeah, there's a few that we could do to fill in this space, but I don't think I want anything that looks that formal. I would like it to look more like a spider web. And to me, the spider web will just be kind of connected like this. Okay, let's go from that one and do another. I'm afraid if I do too many of the fly stitches or feather stitches, that it will look like I did a feather. I don't want it to. Let's try that one and then take the guide back over to this edge. Now, if I decided that this doesn't look full enough, I would just go back and do another layer over top of this. That would give me more crisscrossy lines. Should we go back up to the top and try that while we're not very far here? Okay, let's do up here. Down to that spot. Now where? One from this point. Over here. Ah, my finger is stuck. I will unthread my needle. Let's try there. Let's lay that down and see. Yeah, back up to that spot. So just another layer of crisscrossing spiderwebby threads, I guess. I'm not looking for a bunch of X's. That's where that just went down. Let's try. I don't want to just fill it with X's. I do want it to have less regularity than that. I guess we'll try a long one here. We're going to have to come back and crisscross over top of it to fill it in, but that's starting to look more like what I had imagined in my head. Actually, I had imagined it being very filled in, but it doesn't look right when it's very filled in. So spider webs have different things. Whoops, find one that they can see. This one. Coming out of near the same spot, so it's okay if I do one that angles to there and one that angles to here, both coming out of those same spots. I'm going to go the opposite direction. Okay, where do we want to take this one? I like that long one, how the long one worked, so I'm going to try another long one. Okay, and then from the same spot, or similar spot, let's take one down to right there. So I'm thinking a little more spider webby now in between, like coming out of the same spot and going at different angles. still not predictable. So instead of having the same size gap, I'm now going to take a bigger gap on this one. Let's go from that last spot where we came out and go the opposite direction. And let's do one sort of parallel to that one. I don't think I want to go back over here. I think I want to go up this way, but I don't want it to go back down in the same place, but I need a different angle. I don't want it to be exactly the same angle. So I said parallel, but parallel I think would look less like a web. All right, we might almost be there on this one. Yeah, no, one more. Let's come out right by this one. Now let's lay it down and look. Do we like it going down to that one? Do we like it going over to this one, or halfway in between? It looks like we like it halfway in between, but I don't want the angles. I don't want it to look like we just crisscrossed, so we might need to go a little bit more one direction or the other. I think it's going to be a little bit more up, because if I go down, it kind of disappears. All right, there's our L filled in. Perfect. Woohoo! Now let's move to the O. Okay, so you'll notice if you have the pattern for this that there aren't specific lines for you to stitch on this. That little bit of video instruction right there is how I would suggest that you do it. Just lines back and forth. You can do, if you like, you can start with, I'm going to start up here at this point on this one because that's where it connects to the outside web, so I know I've got things there. You can start with fly stitches if that helps you get some angles going. I'm going to do sort of a little web on this one from that spot, and that's how I'm going to start this one. And they don't have to be straight lines. These aren't straight lines. They can be curved lines. And if you're thinking, does she know what she's doing ahead of time? No, she does not. She's winging it. She's like, where should the next stitch be? Like I'm thinking about in my head going, what are you going to do now? Now that you've got these stitches, what are you going to do next? And I don't know. Let's try a stitch that goes down to this one, because that'll go the opposite way. These two scooted closer than I would have intended on them being. So I'm going to snag this one. By snag it, I'm just going on the far side of it, so that when I put this down, I can kind of pull it back that way. Guess we'll work our way around this side of the O first. And we're running out of thread again. I'm going to do a fly stitch that pulls to this end point right here. Oh, well, it pulled it the whole way, so it didn't show up as what I was thinking, but, and I have a little bit of thread left here, so I could keep going. I'd already turned it over, so I didn't keep going, but you could. So the Hugo's tape here. I don't open it and retighten it every time. When I'm using the regular size of Dazzle, about every 3 times I have to tighten it, 3 times of pulling off the end. This is so much thinner that it might be every 5 or 6 times before I have to pull it off and tighten it up. All right, let's get down to business on this. Oh, what else can we do? Let's try the other side. I'm going to come back out this spot right here. And kind of crisscross these guys. I don't want it to hold them together, so I might try another stitch that just holds one of them so that it can hold them further apart. Let's come back to either that spot or a little bit further. And then we can go from that spot also down to this one where it disappears. I like how it's turning out when there are multiple stitches coming out of the same spot. Kind of how this is with multiple stitches coming out of the same spot. I think that looks somewhat web-like, so I'm kind of sticking with that. They're either coming out of the same spot or just going the same direction. Okay, that did not work to go down there and then turn around and come out of there, so let's take that back down again. Come on. And rethink our next stitch. Let's do one more out of this spot. What I'm doing right now is feeling with my middle finger on the back as to where a good spot to take that needle up through is, where there's not a bunch of other stuff. Let's add in another fly stitch spot. And we'll turn this spot into a kind of a center radius. Okay, so my fly stitch up here, I feel like leaves too big of an opening there compared to everywhere else. So we're gonna do one more stitch from there through to kind of, yep, close off that space. Really, all of the kind of radial arm type stitches are the ones that are looking the most like, the ones I like the most is to have 2 to 3 stitches out of the same vertex, would probably be the mathematical term for it, coming out of the same point. Let's figure out where this one needs to be. Probably right there. And that gives me 3 coming out of that one. Let's add another one coming out of this spot. Coming out of the same spot, and one more. Okay, I would do it coming out of the same spot, but I'm gonna wish that I had something in the middle here, so I'm gonna give it a new location to come out of. But I want more than one coming out of that spot, so let's go back to here and add another one coming out of that spot. Okay, we've got this spot that only has one coming out. I don't want them to get too even. Like, I could just take that one back to here, but then it feels like I'm starting to just do crisscrosses in it. So let's change up angles that we're going at and change up distances so that we get a little less regularity. That will help. Oop. Got that loop. This is the loop that your thread ties a knot in, that if you pull on the direction that the thread towards your needle side, you'll pull it tighter. If you pull it towards the where you came from side, the back side, it'll pull right out. Okay, there's that one. I think I'm going to go to this guy, but take him over here. See if we can go one more. Nope, that's going to give me the same angle if I go back to that spot. Where can I go from this one? And there we go, up to a new angle. It's at 3 o'clock. I hear noises out in my garage. I'm like, it's not time for football to be over. Do we want anything more in that space? Back up here before I started doing the lines out of the same vertex. I don't think I got enough in that space. All right, there we go. So it's just like a messy spirograph, sort of. Pick a spot, take 2 or 3 stitches from that spot, different angles. Pick a spot where they land, 2 or 3 from that spot, and just keep right on going. Now I cannot wait to get the rest of the letters done. It's going to be so fun. All right, let's I'm going to add this stitching in between here because I've got not too long of a thread. That'll get me started on the W. Okay. So how long do you think it takes? I haven't been paying attention, but I know this video is about a half an hour at this point. And I've gone around 2 letters, so that's about 15 minutes per letter. Not quite, but close. So at that rate, there's an hour, there's an hour, and there's an hour. I have about 3 hours left if it stays at that same rate. And I don't know if that, I think I'll get faster at it. I'm faster at the stem stitch than I am at the other, but I think we'll get faster at it. And it's not about how fast it is. I'm just a little bit curious. On this one that has no applique on it, just pretty stitching on pretty wool. We'll go this way till our thread runs out, which may be in 4 stitches. Let's see. That one felt like I took a piece of my finger underneath with me. Let's see if we can get one more stitch out of there. I guess a stitch and a half. And we'll take that one down the back. Someday I will bring my tweezers, my reverse tweezers, out here and do a video about tips and tricks for tying knots where you want them when your thread is super short. Because those tweezers do a great job of holding your thread where it needs to be while you tie the knot. Plus, I have a couple of other tips with using the needle to get what you want. Okay, woohoo! Should we do the W next? Okay. Let's start right here. Now the W, when I drew it, is plenty narrow, so I can probably stay right on my line. It's just that fat, the L and the O, that I somehow accidentally widened while I was tracing the lines. If you wanted to not do beads, you could, as you were going along, do French knots with this sparkle thread. That would give you, you know, little balls of sparkle. I like the idea of the glass beads looking more like dew. Okay, now that we are to the point, we need to turn around. And remember, stem stitch is not a good turnaround stitch. So there's a couple of different strategies that I recommend. One of them is just go back a stitch or two, run your thread. Now if you just go back, run your thread under the loop and then come back up. Now this one can come untwisted because I just went through the first one. If you go through the second one back, it's a little more secure. We're going to have the same situation right here, but this one is only one stitch long, and so I'm just going to go down, and because a stem stitch results in two thread widths covering that space, I am going to take one stitch, two stitches in that same spot, and that will have the same thickness or same effect as if I did stem stitches across the top of there. I have one of the songs from primary. In our church, I teach the 3-year-olds, we call them sunbeams. And one of the songs that we have been working on with them recently, I have stuck in my head this week. I always have a song stuck in my head. It might be a ditty from a commercial. It is sometimes just the little melody that I heard on a reel, but there is always a song running through my head. Okay, again, I'm going to take this one down, go under the thread and back up through the same hole. That way I get a sharp point in my stem stitch. So if you ever hear me humming, I try to stop, but if you ever hear me humming, that would be it. I think I've mentioned before that my 16-year-old has never liked to listen to me sing. He's always, "Mom, stop, Mom, stop, Mom, stop." When he was little, when he was tiny, he would just lift his little fist up and shove it in my mouth. But he also had this little quirk about him when he was a baby that just made me wonder. He'd lift his little face up and he'd rub his knuckles on my eyebrows. Like, until he was, I don't know, 3, I wondered if I was going to have any eyebrows left, because every time he was eating, he was just rubbing his knuckles against my eyebrows. He would do it with anybody. If you were rocking him to sleep or anything, that was his kind of connection, I guess. I don't know what the right word for it is. That he'd rub your eyebrows. I'm a little anxious. I haven't mentioned it to him recently at all, but I'm a little curious to see when he has his own kids if they rub eyebrows. Is that somehow I don't know what the right word would be, a genetic trait that he automatically, it wasn't something that I reinforced or anything, but is that something that he will pass on? We'll see. It was just a thing that if he was, same thing after he wasn't on a bottle anymore. When he was a toddler and you were putting him down for a nap, he would rub your eyebrows as he went to sleep. So for some reason, my furry eyebrows is his, I don't know how we got off on that tangent. Oh, it was me singing. Yeah, that's what it was. That's one of the things that I really like, if this were something we could do live or in person, is that other people could also share fun stories interesting little tidbits of our lives. Nothing huge, nothing super important, nothing that's going to matter in 5 minutes, but yeah. Okay. I'm aware of where that dot is, but I'm also aware of where I want this one to end. And I think this one, yeah, goes to right in the middle of the, I just looked a little bit to the side because I have my pattern right here next to me so that I can see where it goes to. Again, this is going to be one of those shorter ones, and I want it to be straight. So I'm just going to go ahead, and if I wanted it to be curved, I would need to do more than one stitch, or a fly stitch or something that would make it more curved. I've been, every morning I have a notebook that, as part of my getting ready for the day, I pull out the notebook, and obviously I think about it the night before. I pray about it so I'll know what's most important to work on, what to prepare next, how to help people. And in particular, and then I write down in that notebook, I write 3 things that if I finished those 3 things, it would feel like a great day. So I always have my top 3 priorities. If nothing else happened but those 3 things. Now, those 3 things rarely do I get all 3 of them done. And sometimes as I'm working on things through the day, it changes in for whatever reason, my priorities change. So I might get an order, and so I didn't have fill the order ready, but I'm aware of the fact that whatever it is, this order, I'll need to put more patterns together for that because it was more than I had of that one, or I'm aware of the fact that I'm going to need to dye a color for that one because I don't have full kits sitting on the shelves. Lots of full kits I have sitting on the shelves, but not everything. So anyway, sometimes my plans change and sometimes they change because I get grumpy and I'm like, you know what? I've had it. I'm just going to sit and stitch. I am not going to fill in the blank with whatever it is. I'm tired. I don't want an activity that requires a lot of brain work. I want to relax, or I just want to sit down. I have a headache. I have been drinking a Gatorade every day for the past about 10 days. I'm not drinking enough, and it's very hot, and the Gatorade, I suppose, gets me drinking enough, but It also, I think, helps with the electrolytes. If I don't drink one a day in the middle of the day, I tend to get headaches, and I do not love headaches. So I don't know where that started. Sometimes I have a headache and I just decide to sit down and drink some Gatorade, and sometimes that means I've got it in me to stitch, and sometimes it doesn't, and it depends on what I'm stitching. I've got right now quite a bit of stitching that I call it mindless stitching. If like any of this back stitch on these lines, I don't even have to think. It's just a back stitch. Now, if I were going to fill the spaces, that requires more thinking. But so I like to have multiple projects so that I can stitch stitch something that fits the mood of how I'm feeling. Like I could easily go inside and spend the rest of my day and evening stitching on this, or stitching on one of the other Halloween projects. I've got 3 or 4 Halloween projects. 3, 1, 2. Technically 4, because I'm doing another one of these web wishes. I'm going to do a 4-inch square one, a smaller one, that the letters on the inside say boo. And it would work perfect for a coaster. Could turn it into a little quilt and have it be a coaster because it'll be flat. Or another option for the little boo one is to put it in one of the 4-inch stitch showcases. Remember, those are the clear boxes, clear acrylic boxes that have a little special little drawer in them that you can put your handwork in. And because it's inside of the acrylic box, it protects it, but it has the little shelf, so to speak, cubby on top, where you can put your remote, your TV remote, or whatever it happens to be. Okay, let's go all the way up on this one to right here, and then down to that spot. And I think I'm going to do stem stitches on this one because it's plenty long for one stitch. Alright, should we see if I'm better at filling them now? Well, I already know that if I go down there, coming up from there is not a good plan, so let's come up over here. Alright, so what we've talked about is make it look a little bit like a web. 3 or so stitches coming out of the same spot at different angles. So there's 1. There's 2. There's 3. And then pick a new spot. Do the same thing. Typically where one of the other ones ends, but since I have a corner up here, I'm going to go with the corner. And I don't want it to be, I'm not looking for right angles. I'm not looking for square boxes. I'm looking for things to be irregular, uneven. So I really don't want that to be parallel right here. I don't want these two to be parallel because that's too regular. So I'm going to go further down with that spot so that it's not the same. Okay, there it is. I'm like, pull it snug underneath. And then I think we'll go from this one and we'll go 1 to that spot. Now it's already got 1 going up here. And then 1 down to here. And then we've already got 2 coming out of this one, but let's add a 3rd. I have not seen the new Spider-Man movie. I think my son has, though. Yeah, I'm sure he has. I remember now. He made a sweatshirt for it. They got one of the moms of one of the boys cut out some stencils for them, a spider stencil. And they used spray paint, and on one side of their sweatshirt, they spray painted the spider, and on the back side, they spray painted around the spider. So on one side it's black, and on the spider's black, and on the other side it's red with black around it. And then they did a really good job of splattering paint here and there all over it to make it look really nice. You would not have guessed that 16-year-olds made those jackets. And that's what they made them for, was for the premiere. But that's what I feel like right now. I'm like, Spider-Man, Spider-Man. Making spider webs. Okay, I am liking it so far, except I feel like that's too big of a gap there. So I'm gonna have to go back up and add another stitch in there. There we go. That took care of it. And probably from this point down to this bottom corner. It's so much better than what it looked like. I know, you have to take my word for it because that's all we had, but it is much better. I am on that side. Okay, and let's go to right here. Do another one down to this corner. And let's go from the other corner up to right there. And then let's go from here see, I think it needs more going down that way, so we're going to go to kind of in between these guys over here. These thin little W letters are complicated. It's harder to make the crisscrosses. Well, maybe. It seems harder to guess about where to go on these guys. Okay, that's probably enough down in there. I still think I need one more over there, though. That's okay. We will figure out where to add that. When I'm not going to have to jump very far with my thread, I'll go back and add one more. But not parallel to anything, just random. This is going to have the effect of what I was thinking when I dreamed this one up the other night. Now I can't wait to get it done. Oh goodness, we've been going for a very long time. All right. Thank you. I guess let me turn it around because I'm about out of thread again. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you will join us again. Bye-bye.